It was a bitter cold afternoon when the doors of the animal shelter creaked open, letting in a gust of wind that chilled to the bone. Inside, the quiet murmur of the shelter's inhabitants was interrupted by a heart-wrenching cry, a sound that would stay with anyone who heard it for days. A German shepherd, curled in a corner of his cage, whimpered softly, his large brown eyes clouded with sorrow. His once glossy coat was matted, and his body seemed to shrink under the weight of loneliness. The shelter's fluorescent lights flickered, casting a dim glow over the room, but it did nothing to lift the somber mood. Across the room, a man stood frozen, staring at the dog. His name was James Harper, and his life had not been kind to him. At 75 years old, James felt like he had lost more than he had ever gained. His wife, Emma, had passed away 3 years ago, leaving him with nothing but memories. His children were busy with their own lives, too far away to care. The loneliness had settled deep within him, gnawing at him like a slow burn. James had come to the shelter that day with no real purpose, just to escape his empty house for a little while. But when he heard the dog's cry, something stirred within him. He approached the cage cautiously, unsure of what he was doing. He wasn't a dog person, not anymore, but there was something about the way the dog looked at him, with those pleading eyes, that broke through his guarded heart. And then, in an instant, the dog's whimper turned into a low, desperate cry. The sound echoed in the small room, sending a shiver down James's spine. He couldn't explain it, but in that moment, something deep inside him shifted. The loneliness he had carried for so long seemed to match the dog's pain. Both of them had been forgotten. Both of them needed someone. James knelt down beside the dog's cage, his old knees creaking in protest. The shelter worker watched him with a concerned look, but James didn't care. The dog's eyes never left his, and as their gazes met, a promise seemed to form in the air between them, a promise that neither of them was alone anymore. Before we continue, tell us, what part of the world are you in right now? Drop your country in the comments. And if your heart paused for even a second, show your support with a like and a subscribe. Let's carry this feeling forward. James had never been one to share his emotions. Growing up in a small town in the Midwest, feelings were something you kept to yourself. His father, a stern man with hands as rough as the soil he worked, had taught him that. "Don't cry, boy. You're a Harper. We don't show weakness," his father would say. And James had listened. He learned to bury his emotions deep within, hiding his true self behind the walls he built around his heart. He married Emma when he was just 22. She was everything he wasn't: warm, compassionate, always seeing the good in people. They had built a life together, raised 2 beautiful children, and had a house that smelled like home, filled with laughter and love. But as the years went by, something changed. James became distant, focused on work and providing for his family. Emma would often sit by the fireplace, waiting for him to come home, waiting for him to see her. But James was too caught up in the grind of life to notice. Then the day came when Emma fell ill. It started with small signs: a cough, some fatigue. But before they knew it, she was gone. The doctors had tried their best, but nothing could save her. And James was left with nothing but memories. Memories of the woman who had always believed in him, always held him when he needed her the most. After her passing, the house felt hollow. His children, now adults, had their own families and lives. They called occasionally, but it wasn't the same. The house that once echoed with their voices was now eerily quiet. And so, James retreated, lost in his own grief. He found solace in the small things: his morning coffee, the quiet walks in the park, and the occasional conversation with the neighbors. But nothing seemed to fill the emptiness. When James heard about the shelter needing volunteers, he decided to stop by. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he hoped to find something that would fill the void, or maybe it was just a way to pass time. But the moment he stepped inside, he knew this wasn't just a visit. He wasn't just looking for something to do. The first dog he saw in the shelter was a pit bull, with a gentle face and a wagging tail. But James didn't feel that same tug in his heart. He moved on, walking past cage after cage, until he reached the corner where the German shepherd lay. The dog had been there for months, no one ever coming to claim him. His coat had lost its shine, his eyes dimmed with time. But there was something about him, something familiar in his gaze. James knelt down beside the cage, his hand trembling as he reached out. The dog didn't shy away. Instead, he nuzzled James's hand, licking it gently as if he understood the sorrow they both carried. And then, as if to seal the bond between them, the dog rested his head on James's knee. For the first time in a long while, James felt his heart crack open. He wasn't sure why this dog had reached him, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't leaving the shelter without him. "Don't let me be alone anymore," James whispered softly, his voice breaking. The dog looked up at him, and for the first time in years, James felt hope stir within him. James sat there in the cold shelter, the German shepherd's head resting gently on his knee, his breath warm against James's weathered skin. He could feel the dog's chest rise and fall slowly, the weight of his sorrow pressing against James's heart. It was almost as if the dog was waiting for him, waiting for James to do something, to make a decision that would change both of their lives forever. And in that quiet, fragile moment, the world seemed to stop moving. The shelter worker, a young woman named Clara, had been watching from a distance. She hesitated before stepping forward, unsure whether to interrupt the bond that was forming between the two. But as she came closer, she couldn't help but smile, seeing the tenderness in James's expression. "You know," Clara said softly, "his name is Buddy. He's been here for 6 months now. He's been passed up by so many people. But there's something different about you, Mr. Harper. I can see it." James didn't answer right away. He just stroked the dog's fur, his fingers trembling. The quiet hum of the shelter's fluorescent lights was the only sound around them. It was as if the universe had conspired to give James this moment, a moment of peace in the chaos of his life. Buddy shifted slightly, lifting his head and looking up at James with those soulful eyes. There was a silent understanding between them, as if the dog had seen the same loneliness, the same pain, and now, in each other's company, they had found a kindred spirit. It was all too overwhelming, the raw emotion that surged through James. He had always been so strong, so composed, but now, as the weight of years of grief and solitude threatened to spill over, he felt like a shell being cracked open. "You're not alone anymore, Buddy," James whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been so alone, but you're my chance. You're my second chance." Buddy's tail wagged gently against the floor, and James could feel it. A shift, a spark of hope igniting within him. Clara watched them for a moment, allowing the silence to hang in the air. She could see the change happening before her eyes. There was something magical about this connection, something unspoken yet profound. She had seen hundreds of people come and go from the shelter, but never like this. Never with such a deep, meaningful bond forming so quickly. "You know," Clara continued, her voice breaking the silence, "adopting a dog like Buddy isn't just about giving him a home. It's about giving yourself a chance, too. You might be surprised what a little love and companionship can do." James didn't know what to say. He had heard that line before, that pets could heal broken hearts, could mend wounds that seemed too deep to heal. But hearing it now, in this moment, it felt different. He wasn't just adopting a dog for the sake of company. He wasn't just trying to fill the silence in his home. He was giving Buddy a chance, and in turn, Buddy was giving him the chance to feel something again. Clara walked over to a nearby table, grabbing a clipboard and pen. "I'll start the adoption paperwork," she said, her voice calm and professional. "If you're sure this is what you want." James nodded slowly, his hand still resting on Buddy's head. "I'm sure," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. As Clara stepped away, James remained with Buddy, his mind racing. He was no longer the man he used to be, the man who shut himself off from the world, who believed he didn't need anyone. Now, in this small shelter, with this dog at his side, he realized that he had been wrong. He needed someone, and Buddy needed him. It was as simple and as complicated as that. The dog nuzzled closer to James, and for the first time in years, James felt a tear slip from his eye. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It wasn't a tear of grief. It was a tear of release, a tear of hope. "Thank you," James whispered, not sure if he was speaking to the dog or to the universe itself. The shelter worker returned with the adoption papers, but when she saw the tears on James's face, she paused. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft and understanding. James nodded, though his emotions were raw and overwhelming. "I didn't know it could feel like this," he said, his voice hoarse. "Like I'm not so lost anymore." Clara smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "That's the power of love," she said quietly. "It's never too late for second chances." James signed the papers, his heart swelling with a new sense of purpose. As he did, Buddy looked up at him again, his tail wagging with a slow, steady rhythm. For the first time in a long time, James felt like he was no longer alone in the world. He had Buddy now, and in some strange way Buddy had him. Together, they would face whatever came next, and for the first time in years, James wasn't afraid. The bond between them was unspoken, yet undeniable. And in that moment it was enough. It had been 2 weeks since James had taken Buddy home. The house, once eerily silent, now echoed with the soft sounds of paws padding across the wooden floor. James couldn't help but smile whenever Buddy looked at him, those same soulful brown eyes filled with trust. It wasn't easy, though. Buddy still had his fears. He would flinch at loud noises, and sometimes, in the middle of the night, James would wake to find Buddy trembling in his bed, a silent reminder of the life he had lived before. But James understood. He understood better than anyone that healing took time. He had spent years bottling up his grief, pretending it didn't affect him. And now, as he watched Buddy slowly come out of his shell, he realized that he, too, was healing. They were two broken souls, each learning to trust again. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with streaks of pink and orange, James found himself sitting on the porch, a warm cup of tea in his hands. Buddy sat beside him, his head resting on James's leg, his tail lazily wagging as he gazed out at the quiet street. The wind carried the scent of blooming flowers, and for the first time in years, James felt a weight lift off his chest. He didn't know how long it had been since he'd last felt this at peace. He couldn't even remember when his loneliness had become so suffocating. But now, with Buddy beside him, there was something new. Something that made the world feel a little brighter, a little kinder. "Hey, Buddy," James whispered, rubbing the dog's ears. "You've come a long way, haven't you? And so have I." Buddy lifted his head, his eyes locking with James's. It was as if the dog understood every word, every emotion. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. It wasn't just a man and a dog sitting together on a porch. It was two beings, both broken in their own way, finding healing in one another. But just as the moment felt perfect, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted the quiet. James looked up to see his daughter, Rachel, stepping out of the car, a look of surprise on her face. She hadn't visited much since her mother's passing. The distance had grown between them, and though she had always been kind, her life had become too busy, too full of its own challenges. "Dad," Rachel called softly, walking up to the porch. "What's going on here?" James stood slowly, his knees creaking. "Hey, Rachel," he said, his voice a little shaky but filled with warmth. I've been doing some thinking." Rachel frowned, glancing at Buddy, who was now standing beside James, his tail still wagging gently. "You adopted a dog?" James nodded. "His name's Buddy. I think he might have saved me more than I saved him." Rachel's eyes softened, but there was a slight hesitation in her expression. "Dad, we've all been worried about you. You've been so distant. I just don't want you to be alone anymore." James stepped forward, a hand resting on his daughter's shoulder. "I know, honey, I know. But sometimes you just need a second chance. And sometimes, it comes in ways you don't expect." Rachel's eyes flickered with something that resembled understanding, but it was clear she still didn't fully grasp what James meant. It wasn't just about Buddy. It was about the connection they shared, how they had both been lost, both had needed healing, and now, here they were, finding their way back to each other. "Dad, I'm sorry," Rachel said, her voice small. I didn't realize how much you needed this. James smiled gently, his hand still on her shoulder. I didn't either, Rachel. But life has a way of surprising you. Buddy stepped forward, his tail wagging eagerly. He sniffed at Rachel's hand, and for a brief moment, she looked at the dog with a mixture of uncertainty and curiosity. Then, without hesitation, Rachel knelt down, letting Buddy sniff her face, her body language slowly softening. I think I'm starting to get it, she said quietly. James could feel a lump form in his throat as he watched Rachel and Buddy interact. It was a small moment, but it felt like a giant leap forward. In that simple exchange, a healing bridge was built between father and daughter. It was as if Buddy had become the catalyst, the missing piece that had brought them back together, just as he had helped James heal. For the first time in a long time, James allowed himself to let go of the fear, the guilt, and the lingering sadness. He had found a second chance, not just with Buddy, but with his daughter. The isolation he had once known no longer felt so suffocating. There was hope again, and there was love. Maybe it's time we start over, James said, his voice thick with emotion. Maybe it's time we stop running from the things we need. Rachel looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. I think that's a good idea, Dad. The three of them, James, Rachel, and Buddy, stood there together on the porch, the setting sun casting long shadows across the lawn. And in that moment, James knew that no matter what came next, they had all been given the chance to heal, to grow, and to love again. It had been a month since James adopted Buddy, and though things had improved, it wasn't without its challenges. Every day, Buddy made small strides. He trusted a little more. He let James pet him a little longer. He started to follow James around the house. But there were still moments, like late at night, when Buddy would wake from a nightmare, his body tense, eyes wide in panic. James would find himself sitting by the dog's side, whispering comforting words until Buddy's trembling body calmed. The struggles weren't limited to Buddy alone. James, too, was navigating the ups and downs of this new chapter in his life. After years of solitude, it was difficult to adjust to the presence of another living being in his home. It was almost as if Buddy had unlocked emotions James had buried long ago. Moments of joy mixed with frustration, laughter intertwined with tears. But it was also an awakening. It was a reminder that living wasn't just about surviving. It was about embracing the moments, no matter how small. One evening, James sat down with Buddy on the couch, his legs stretched out, Buddy nestled beside him, eyes staring intently at the TV screen. It was a rerun of a show they'd both watched before, but tonight it felt different. The hum of the TV, the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, the quiet presence of Buddy beside him. It was comforting. Just as James settled into the calm, a sudden knock on the door startled him. Buddy bolted upright, growling low in his throat, his body tense. James quickly reached out, soothing the dog with his hand, but his own nerves flared up. Who could be knocking at this hour? When he opened the door, he found his daughter Rachel standing there, her face strained. Dad, I need to talk to you, Rachel said, her voice filled with concern. James stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. What's wrong, honey? Rachel entered, her eyes darting around the room. I've been thinking about us, about everything. I've been so caught up in my own life that I never really stopped to see how you were doing. I thought you were okay, but I was wrong. I've been so distant, and I don't want to be that way anymore. James could see the guilt on her face, but he could also see something else, a glimmer of understanding. She wasn't just apologizing. She was learning. Rachel took a deep breath before continuing, her voice shaky. I was wrong, Dad. You're not just here to be a background figure in my life. You matter to me. I've been selfish, and I don't want to lose you, or Buddy. I can't keep running from the fact that we both need healing, and I want to help with that. Buddy, who had been silently observing the exchange, let out a soft whine, sensing the raw emotion in the air. Rachel, still standing in the doorway, turned her attention to the dog, and after a brief moment of hesitation, she knelt down to his level. She reached out, letting Buddy sniff her hand, and for the first time he didn't flinch. He nudged her hand gently, his tail wagging in tentative approval. Rachel smiled softly. I think we're both learning how to trust again." James watched the interaction, his heart swelling with a sense of pride and relief. This wasn't just about him and Buddy anymore. This was about healing old wounds, ones that had been left unattended for too long. "I've been afraid for a long time, Rachel," James said quietly, his voice filled with a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. "Afraid that I wasn't enough, that I couldn't fix the things I broke. But maybe I've been looking at it all wrong. Maybe it's not about fixing everything, but about learning to live with the brokenness. Together." Rachel nodded, tears threatening to spill. "I think I've been afraid too. Afraid of seeing you like this, afraid of seeing myself like this. But now, with Buddy, I can see there's still a chance for us to heal." The words hung in the air, heavy with the understanding that had finally taken root between them. James reached out, pulling his daughter into a gentle hug, his heart full. Buddy, sensing the tenderness of the moment, snuggled between them, his head resting against Rachel's knee. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But in that moment, James realized something fundamental. Healing was never a straight line. It was a journey, full of setbacks, doubts, and moments of vulnerability. But as long as they kept moving forward, even at their own pace, it would be enough. The months passed, and the healing process that had begun with Buddy's adoption blossomed into something beautiful. The house, once dark and cold, was now filled with the sounds of laughter, companionship, and even the occasional playful bark from Buddy. James had found himself not just adjusting to life with a dog, but embracing it with a newfound joy. Buddy had come a long way. The dog, who had once been so wary and unsure, now greeted James each morning with excitement, tail wagging furiously as if he was thanking James for this second chance. But it wasn't just Buddy who had healed. James had changed too. He wasn't the same man who had wandered into the shelter that cold afternoon, a shell of a person, lost in the shadow of grief. Now there was light in his eyes. There was purpose in his steps. And Rachel, too, had transformed. After their emotional conversations and the moments of reconnecting, she had made more time to visit her father. She and Buddy had formed an unexpected bond, one built on trust and healing, just like the one between James and the dog. Rachel had also begun to understand something profound, that healing wasn't about pretending the past didn't hurt. It was about being there for each other, despite the scars. One warm afternoon, James sat on the porch, Buddy curled up beside him, the sun casting long shadows across the lawn. Rachel arrived, holding a small box in her hands. She walked up to the porch with a determined look in her eyes, her posture straighter than usual, a sense of confidence that hadn't been there months ago. "Dad," she said softly, as she handed him the box, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about second chances and how sometimes it's not about fixing things but learning to live with them. And I think I've found something that might make things right between us." James looked at her curiously, his brow furrowing slightly as he opened the box. Inside, nestled in soft tissue paper, was a small photograph. It was a picture of the three of them, James, Rachel, and Buddy, sitting together on the porch, their smiles wide, the warmth of the afternoon sun on their faces. "I had this framed," Rachel said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's a reminder that we're moving forward, Dad. We're healing, and we're doing it together." James looked at the photograph, the simple image carrying so much weight. For years, he had carried the burden of loss, regret, and loneliness. But now, in this one photo, there was hope, there was love, and there was a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. He looked at Rachel, and then at Buddy, who lay at their feet, content and trusting. In that moment, everything came full circle. "I don't know if I ever told you this, Rachel," James said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "but I've always been proud of you. Even when I wasn't the best dad, even when I wasn't present, I was proud of the woman you've become. And now, I'm proud of the father I'm becoming. I'm proud of the family we're building, together." Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes, and she took a deep breath. "Dad, I'm proud of you too. And I'm sorry for not being there when you needed me. I've learned so much from you, and from Buddy. We all deserve second chances. We just have to be willing to take them. James smiled softly, his heart full. It wasn't about fixing everything. It was about rebuilding piece by piece, one step at a time. He and Rachel had started their own journey, one they had never expected, but were now ready to embrace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of gold and purple, James looked at Buddy, his loyal companion who had brought so much light into his life. He had saved Buddy, but Buddy had saved him too. "Thank you, Buddy," James whispered, his voice carrying the weight of everything he had been through. "You've given me more than I ever thought possible. You've given me a chance to live again." Buddy looked up at him, his eyes shining with affection, and James knew, in that moment, that they had both been given something extraordinary, a new lease on life. Rachel stood up and placed her hand on her father's shoulder. "Let's make sure we never forget this. The healing, the love, the second chances. Let's keep going forward, no matter what." And in that moment, the past seemed to melt away. The pain, the regrets, the lost years, they were all just memories now. The present was all that mattered, and the future was full of hope, love, and endless possibilities. As we reach the end of this incredible journey, James, Rachel, and Buddy have shown us something deeply profound. That healing isn't a quick fix, and second chances don't come easily. It takes time, love, and the willingness to face our own brokenness. But in doing so, we find that the connections we form, whether with an animal, a family member, or even with ourselves, can become the greatest sources of strength and hope. James's story is a reminder that it's never too late to start over. No matter how much time has passed or how much we've been through, we all deserve a second chance. And sometimes, those second chances come from the most unexpected places. From a dog who needed a home, or from a daughter who needed to rediscover her father. It's never about being perfect. It's about the love and effort we put into healing and growing together. And Buddy, the loyal German Shepherd who started as a scared, lonely dog in a shelter, became the symbol of transformation, not just for James, but for everyone involved. His presence filled the emptiness, and with each wag of his tail, he reminded James and Rachel that they weren't alone anymore. I want to leave you with this message. Don't be afraid to take that first step toward healing. Don't shy away from the love that is waiting for you, even when it seems hard to believe. Life is full of second chances, and it's never too late to make a change. If you believe in the power of second chances and want to be part of a community of hope, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video. Your support helps spread these stories of transformation and love to others who need them. And lastly, where are you watching from? Share your country in the comments, and let's see how far this message of healing and love can reach. If this story touched you, leave a comment saying, "Love German Shepherd Dog," and let us know how you're embracing your own second chances. Thank you for being a part of this journey.